evening, everyone, and welcome to Planet First Action. My name is Ryan Gordon.
And I'm Jacob Frost.
And we are your hosts.
Honestly, Ryan, I cannot believe that we are already wrapping up July, heading into August.
I know, it is absolutely wild how quickly this entire year, much less the summer, has really flown by.
I know, people frequently talk about this sort of quote-unquote summer slowdown, but we have not seen that at all. It's not slowed down in terms of the pace, and it's also only picked up in terms of the heat.
That is absolutely right. And don't forget the humidity. It is absolutely crazy outside. It's much less flying and much more swimming.
And we are not meteorologists, and we're not going to spend the entire episode talking about the heat. But really, on that note, just to pause on it because it is important, extreme heat can really be deadly. It is not a joking matter. So especially all of you who are out there, take your precautions, especially the elderly. Make sure you hydrate and take it seriously because it is unfortunately a real thing that we need to deal with today, and it can be deadly. So take caution.
Absolutely. And we wanted to take this moment to thank everyone who has tuned in to earlier episodes of this series and for subscribing and supporting this community and this work. We cannot wait to get part 2 of our interview with Raise Green's co-founder and chief investment officer, Jackie Logan.
I know. I'm so excited to continue this conversation with Jackie. But before we do, we'll add a little bit of important context, especially for those of you who are just tuning in for the first time.
Absolutely. This series of Planet First Action is about the understanding of how dramatically our lives and communities are going to be affected by technologies that seem to be kind of part of this far-off distance kind of sci-fi future. But really, in reality, they are here today, being financed today, creating jobs today, and really changing the very nature of the way that we work and live together.
Exactly. And some of you listening in might be saying, wow, Jay, Ryan, that's very poetic, changing the nature of the way we live together. Fundamentally, that sounds amazing. But what does that even mean? It doesn't mean anything to me. Okay, fair enough. Maybe that is a bit waxing poetic. But why don't we take this example, just very specifically, of residents here in our backyard in New York City for just how real and concrete are the impacts that are happening today from these new policies. Now, some of you may already know this, and many of you who may not if you're not in New York City or this greater area, is that there is a new law that's been put in place, and it's called Local Law 97. And what it's been put in place to do is to reduce emissions in New York City's largest buildings. And it is in effect now. What that means is if you live in one of those buildings or you know someone who lives in one of those buildings that's affected by Local Law 97, there is a very real possibility that you are going to start seeing changes to the building you live in right now, because building owners need to deploy retrofits and clean energy solutions to be able to become compliant. Otherwise, they're going to start having to pay fines as soon as next year. Changing your windows, improving the insulation, electrifying appliances, bringing on solar panels, the list goes on of what those changes can be.
Absolutely. When you look at the face of it, it's like, wow, that's actually really amazing. All these really exciting kind of new technology is going to be deployed where I live. But at the end of the day, it's also something that's going to be kind of an upheaval in terms of what actually happens in basically people's daily lives. And also combine that with the billions of dollars of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund being made available for this kind of decarbonization. And you have set the stage for this massive and rapid changes where hundreds of thousands of people in New York City specifically live in their homes. And that's just simply one example. There are similar laws in tons of other cities like Boston, Washington, D.C., San Francisco, L.A. The list goes on, and that are really spurring this transformation faster and faster. And it's going to happen across the entire country.
Exactly. So when we say that this is a show about these new technologies, the way in which we live being fundamentally transformed, that is quite literally the case. That's the truth. And it's not just, to have a show about it, to talk about it for the sake of talking about it. This show, this work, this is a call to action. This is a call for communities to come together, to convene, to learn about what those changes are that are not just on their way, but in many cases are already here, so that communities and stakeholders from all sectors can be prepared to make the most of this opportunity for our families and our communities.
That's right. Because it really is going to impact everyone. And we say call to action. We really mean that for ourselves and for everyone listening in. That pursuit of a higher purpose for the greater good. In his parting words to fellow Americans, the late Senator John McCain, really an American hero and former presidential candidate and a true public servant, stated, "Our identities and sense of worth are not circumscribed, but enlarged by serving good causes bigger than ourselves."
That's exactly right. He said it beautifully. And to adapt one of the late senator's quotes that he shared actually initially when speaking of the global economy and adapting it for the reality of climate change and climate action today, that to argue against it is like stating opposition to the weather. It continues whether you like it or not. And because of the fact that it is going to continue whether we like it or not, we have to come together to learn, to engage, and to act.
That's right. And the truth of it is, we aren't here to debate politics or debate the science, but to look at the leaders who are really stewarding these changes today so that we can learn and be a part of it. And we are going to get more into the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund during part 2 today with Jackie Logan. But if you want to learn more about the GGRF or about Local Law 97 in New York, you can head over to planetfirstaction.com, where we have resources available for you.
That's right. And this is actually something that's really important to note, because this is not a show that is also just for those who are already on the front lines of sustainability. This is something that is relevant and valuable regardless of where you are in your sustainability journey. There's always going to be something that you can learn from these leaders who we highlight on this stage here at the world-leading venture platform, Newlab, in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. We've got leaders like Cam Lawrence, the Newlab CEO, Tony Kearns, the founding partner of Purpose Venture Group, and today's guest, Jackie Logan, again, the co-founder and chief investment officer of Raise Green.
Jackie Logan, who not only has tremendous valuable expertise, but also insights from her work on the front lines of some of the biggest programs and initiatives shaping our future today. The ones we just mentioned, and if you've been listening to previous episodes, you'll know we're talking about the $27 billion that have been awarded by the EPA to transform our communities, making them more energy efficient, cleaner, more sustainable, the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. And one of the most amazing things about Jackie Logan and her experience and leadership is that she has insights into one of the most important levers of change in the modern times, the financial markets. She has a deep understanding of how the financial markets created the world that we live in today and how they can be harnessed to drive just and equitable outcomes for our future.
It's true. It's one of those things that for many in the world today is sort of this far-off, distant thing of what's happening with these investors and financial markets and the flows of capital, and it doesn't even mean anything for a lot of the real economy, when you're really building physical things and durable goods. But the truth is the financial markets, that financial layer that exists over top of the economy, is one of the most important tools that we have available to us to drive effective change. And if you listen to part 1 of Jackie's interview, you'll know exactly what we're talking about when we say that she has the insight and the experience in that area. And if you haven't listened already, we absolutely encourage you to hit pause and go check it out first. Jackie really does see the bigger picture and knows just how much our communities can benefit and will be impacted by recent changes and programs from the public sector being harnessed by the private sector.
And also, it's not only just that, but also there's other things that can be seemingly small but actually have huge, massive consequences. Things like direct pay, which enables whole portions of the economy and our communities to really access the benefits of the financial markets like never before. And especially when it's paired with the deployment of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund's $27 billion. It can really supercharge and rapidly transform our homes, our commutes, our jobs, really our entire communities. And here's just a bit from Jackie about the importance of direct pay from part 1.
Direct pay is one of the amazing buckets of opportunity that is we have not even seen where that is going to go yet, because the market hasn't solved how to all the aspects around direct pay. But in essence, the Inflation Reduction Act, or just in general, folks are probably familiar that there have been incentives given by the government, in particular for solar. They have been historically called investment tax credits. Mm-hmm. Also for wind, energy efficiency, certain other, EVs, et cetera. So there have been tax advantages, and they've been critical in order to get these industries moving with enough volume so they can start to bring the costs down. But if you don't pay taxes, you can't take advantage of a tax credit. And there have been all kinds of, complicated tax equity, packages that have actually enabled today various organizations to do solar projects and not take the tax advantage themselves, but all that kinds of stuff. I won't get into the weeds. But all of that is to say is that actually tax-exempt organizations themselves have really not been able to take advantage, to actually own their own solar projects and things like that, because they couldn't directly take advantage of the tax credit. But now they can.
Exactly. And as you could tell from what Jackie was sharing in part 1, we cannot wait to continue the conversation with Jackie Logan on stage now in just a moment. But before we do, we want to reiterate something that we know to be true and important, that our forward progress to a more just, equitable, prosperous, and sustainable society depends on our collective ability to harness diverse perspectives, voices, and leaders from all parts of our community. And a big area that, though improving, needs more work is the amplification and support of our women leaders.
Absolutely. And as a part of that, as we discussed in the last episode, is recognizing the work from those who came before and really paved the way. And the other part is looking to the women leaders of today. Leaders like Jackie Logan, and highlighting their work and experience and leadership for all to learn from and really be inspired by.
That's exactly right. And we would be remiss for ourselves if we didn't mention Julien, our executive producer, who has done so much work in the background to make this entire show possible, for which we are just so grateful. It is always, there are those women leaders who are there, visible on the front lines, and there are those also that are behind the scenes, and each of them need their recognition and that appreciation in terms of what they have done to create the society that we want today and that we want in the future. And with that, as we get ready to continue this conversation on stage with Jackie Logan for part 2 of our interview with her, we hope you not only enjoy this episode, that you learn something valuable, but that you also take the time to share it along to your networks so that even more can benefit from Jackie Logan's unique expertise and insight, especially in this crucial moment in our history.
That's right. And with that, here's part 2 with Jackie Logan.
So we know you may not be able to share everything that you're working on behind the scenes when it comes to the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund and what you're doing with Raise Green on that front, but would love to just start with that topic specifically, and I guess start by saying, with what you've been working on, how do you think the audience, especially when it's either startups or other policymakers or community leaders, how should they be thinking about the rollout of that capital, knowing it's around the corner?
Yeah, so it is, as I said, incredible. This is just like life-changing, because this is, so once again, $27 billion. It's been awarded to a layer of folks who are then going to award it down, with the idea ultimately that this is getting pushed down into local communities, and they're to specifically, and it comes in 3 different buckets, we can talk about that, but high level, to provide 2 things. One is, here's money to get projects done in tried and true stuff. Solar projects, there's money for wind, energy efficiency, and EV infrastructure and EVs. It is like, it's win-win stuff. And this is a portion of this money, let's say 20 plus billion of it, of the 27 billion, is literally to back up projects. So think things like, you're now doing some solar projects in a community with low FICO scores. In the past you couldn't get that financed, right? You're going to do residential solar across, X number of houses, et cetera, and very difficult to get the financing in the past because the underlying homeowners, et cetera, didn't. Well, this money is coming in to think creatively and say, you know what? Okay, this project, it's going to cost $500,000 to build. We're going to come in and we're going to give a loan loss guarantee for up to 5% or whatever. Well, now you start to talk about, private capital now goes, oh, okay. You mean now we're in a space where I kind of get it. My credit models kind of work, and et cetera, et cetera. Now, this all hasn't been figured out fully yet. It's all work in progress. But this money is coming in to do things like that. It could come in, and it could be a grant, some of it. It could come in and be the development capital, which is the highest risk portion of the project. And then, it can come in all different kinds of ways. The idea, though, about the large part of this money is that it is supposed to be recycled. So this is the beginning of a long, hopefully, work stream, if you will, because this money, the folks that are getting this money granted to them from the government, is then not supposed to grant it all out. They're supposed to be lending it out. Yes, there may be some losses there. That's the point. But it is, and a large amount of this money is supposed to be matched 7-to-1 with private capital. So just think about that. So $1 billion is going to, go out with some sort of support mechanism, et cetera. How all those are going to, unfold, it's still work in progress. And then to bring in this private capital. So It is so high level. It is the monies are big chunk is really to seed financial products that are going to enable private capital to come in. And in addition, a good portion of the money is to build capacity, which is incredibly important because a lot of this money is going to be pushed down to community development organizations, CDFIs. These are the financial institutions in the community who understand the community, but many of them have not been focused in green infrastructure. That's new. So there is a lot of capacity building that needs to happen. So the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund also gives funds to bring that down and build capacity amongst the organization so this money can actually go to work and go to work in a good way. So very, very exciting. And in as far as what we here at Raise Green, so the monies we're just, the folks that were awarded the money and how much they're each getting was really finalized in April and March, May, April. And now the final tweaks are being done. So it's not even in the hands of folks. Lots of work being done, of course, in the meantime. One of the things that Raise Green is working on is we realize that there needs to be a lot of collaboration here. And we see ourselves as the kind of the private capital community-oriented slice. And we are very focused on bringing folks together to have those conversations. So we're kicking off a thought leadership series, starts in July. And our first conversation is going to be with the great folks at the Texas Clean Energy Fund. That is the Green Bank in Texas. And starting to unpack what does private capital need to look like for the projects and the way you see seeding projects, and starting to have those conversations. We are super honored that the Texas Green Bank actually wrote Raise Green right into some of their applications, using us as an example of how you can engage and bring in private community capital. And so we're super focused on this thought leadership series to get the dialogue going and bring people together so that we can fine tune what that capital needs to look like.
Exactly, and that is at the core of why we do Planet First Action as well. It's to bring those stakeholders together to facilitate that sort of conversation, to enable action. And on that note, just for everyone that's listening in, all of the links that Jackie's mentioned, whether it's a thought leadership series or even just Raise Green generally, are available in the show notes. They'll also be on planetfirstaction.com. So definitely go check it out and get engaged with Raise Green on that front.
Yeah.
For sure. So now digging into this a little bit, just because, even as our audience can even hear from you, one is that this is like your passion, right? This is literally one of the reasons why you actually built and actually co-founded Raise Green in the first place. But also, like, you have so much background in just being able to do these things and these kinds of things, even like getting into like fintech and being able to actually think of new innovative ways in order to kind of structure and deploy new kind of capital. So thinking of it in the GGRF kind of framework, really, what kind of new financial instruments do you think are going to be deployed through that kind of system? The design and creation of a secondary marketplace, for instance. Like, there's a ton of stuff that can be there, and you clearly have the background in terms of being able to kind of be, give us a little bit of a crystal ball.
In full disclosure, we're all grappling with what's that going to look like, and a piece of it is going to be meaningful conversations and bringing us all along together. I will say that one of the there's some barometers, if you will, that we're focused on, and first and foremost, what we're hearing is flexible capital is going to be very important, because to the extent the green banks themselves and the CDFIs are trying to figure out, are trying to get the projects identified. They've got to identify all the projects, right? That's a lot of work in and of itself. And then figure out how they plug in from a capital perspective, to the extent that they can know that folks like Raise Green are around to say, hey, this, give us a ring and we'll come in. So one of the things that we feel that we can offer and are really catalyzing around is thinking through how we structure things in a flexible manner for the folks that are trying to get this money out. Now, many of the idea is to get this money out and deployed in projects in progress starting in 2025. So and there are goals to have it all out, and there are carbon emission goals in 7 years. So that means projects have to be out and done. So this is not a slow to action. This is we need to all move very quickly. The good news is that we're not talking about new technologies, but as you know, getting anything done is challenging. So one is the flexible capital. The other thing is what we're thinking about is it needs to be replicable. So what we want to be able to do is whatever we do here, bring it somewhere else, That's a piece of, that's how we think anyhow at Raise Green, because that's how you get scale and market recognition as well. So that's another piece. And then another aspect of that is standardization, which comes along with repeatable. But to the extent that, underlying documentation, et cetera, can become as standardized as possible. That's the other piece that we're thinking about. But the critical, and then the other just whole sleeve, which we talked about already, is how do we plug into direct pay and get that kicking? So, that's a very more specific thing. But that's kind of the financial engineering areas that we're focusing on. And as many conversations as we can have just gets us up a notch.
Yeah, for sure. So one of the other things, and you actually already talked about this already, but is how important partnerships are. I mean, at the end of the day, partnerships are the key to success, full stop. There is nothing else that's actually going to do it. We have to do it all together. No one person, no one organization is going to be able to lift this up. So thinking about this when it starts coming to kind of the GGRF again, what is your perspective in terms of what types of partnerships we need to see more of?
Yeah, so I would say, look, high level, the ability, the application to the EPA, that's where the money is being given out from, brought together partners. It has catalyzed so many different coalitions already. It's phenomenal. So that alone, for example, the greenhouse gas reduction funds, this $27 billion, are split into 3 groups, big chunks. One group is $7 billion approximately, is for what's called the Solar for All sleeve. That has 60 awardees. Those individual awardees are they themselves groups that have come together to figure out what their application was and what their plan was. Similarly, there is another sleeve that received $14 billion, the National Clean Investment Fund, anyhow. Here go NCIF. Here go that's a $14 million. That was awarded to 3 different coalitions. One of them being Climate United. That organization is already 3 big organizations that have come. I mean, the amount of collaboration, partnering that has occurred just around this money is already making things happen. So just because we cannot be working in silos, because to get projects done, particularly in LIDAC communities, I mean, we all have to come together. So that is everything from the solar developers, who actually are the ones who have the expertise to create the projects, or the energy efficiency folks, or et cetera, all the way through to governmental organizations that are going to have to permit these things, et cetera, all the way to the financier. So those conversations are happening. We're talking to all the green banks, and we have more to speak to. So those partnerships are everybody is coalescing around this money and the opportunity here, because it's really stand out. Partners are critical. It's not going to be done by one group. And on the other hand, it is going to take individual partnerships, I think, to do some demonstration projects and get some things rocking. So Raise Green's super excited about the first folks that we're working closely with, and obviously the Connecticut Green Bank, the Montgomery County Green Bank, looking forward to conversations with the DC Green Bank, all these green banks, and some of the CDFIs as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and it's exactly right. And on that note of partnerships, we are so thrilled to be having this conversation on this stage here at Newlab, because Newlab is just an incredible partner to so many. And this stage itself is, or like we said on last week's episode, has already got a special place in climate history and in the sort of the mission of sustainability and deployment of the green energy transition. And Newlab is one that's going to continue to be a pivotal partner for a lot of these organizations, given what they do at this sort of the ground level of place-based and innovative sort of support. I think that's actually a question I'd love to ask you is, to your point, there's these massive organizations that are coming together behind the APA's disbursement of the GGRF. And that's fantastic. It's great to see that movement at that scale, especially at that speed. How do you see the role of organizations like Newlab when it comes to supporting companies raising on the platform generally, but also in the context of how the GGRF is going to roll out, knowing that what Newlab brings in part is that emphasis on being local, being a part of the community in terms of the innovation that it helps support?
That's interesting. Now I'm going to have to think of a demonstration project, which I'll call up the folks at Block Power. We'll get this group, and maybe we can get something together with Raise Green specifically.
The audience heard it here first. This is going to be happening.
Oops.
It started at this stage right here. Power of this stage.
Look, organizations like this that, number one, support startups, which is and create ecosystems where not it's dialogue, but it also is expertise. It brings in the opportunity for financing, and there are going to be a ton of projects and opportunities happening right here in the local New York area. So it's actually, now you've spurred my mind to think about the opportunity to do something, demonstration like. And bring in the folks here and the wonderful space here, because a lot of this is about education and getting the word out. I mean, it is incredible. We at Raise Green, just educating people about investment crowdfunding. A lot of folks don't even know this capability exists to raise capital in this manner and access community and enable community ownership. So education and getting the word out is critical, and organizations like this are, really, really offer that platform.
That's exactly right.
So,
I'm excited to see what that ends up becoming, too.
Yeah, now the wheels are moving. I'm going to call up Donnell. And,
So, we are huge data nerds, just generally speaking. That's just kind of where we come from, is that, we come from, if you can't measure it, you're not being able to actually be able to deploy it. So when you start thinking about how that actually applies into this particular sector and sustainability and climate tech, and especially when you start thinking about investors and being able to understand and be able to quantify risk, data is challenging.
That's right.
You get into, there's a lot of nuance just in terms of being able to understand, okay, well, look, a lot of these are nascent industries that don't necessarily have the historical precedent that you're able to see. So with that, being able to understand it, and then also, what do you think and how do you believe that the GGRF could actually go ahead and actually try and alleviate some of those concerns? Sure. Not necessarily at a micro level, being able to understand, okay, well, look, this company needs to be able to do this, and this is kind of what it is, but even at a macro level and how those two things kind of differ.
Well, as I mentioned, so there's a couple of different ways to think about it. One is the new technology, is it going to make it? Is it going to get to, commercialization, all those kinds of things? And then you can think of the tried and true type of technologies that we have that are just getting better and better. including one of the most critical things that, and I think this is the decade of the battery, and actually had the great honor of working with the Clean Fight last year. Grace Green was a financing partner with them, with their cohort. Their focus was battery, and just thinking through, we can start to create all these renewable energy, all this energy, right? But if you can't use it immediately and you don't have the grid to, there's so many pieces to making this successful, but you got to have, you're going to have
somewhere to put it.
Places to put it,
is a huge portion.
and that will feed resilience and things like that, all these other wonderful things. But even in the solar, the tried and true space, the greenhouse gas reduction, as we talked about, is money that's being granted to be clever, to take chances, to figure out how do I bring in private capital. And honestly, whatever the new financial engineering that's going to come out of this, and demonstration projects and things, in my view, it's going to spill over to other types of financial products in this space. And at the end of the day, we still need to get more money into climate. I just saw Bloomberg's NEF, I guess in 2023 globally spent in climate about 1.8 trillion. And they estimate in order to hit the Paris net zero, we need to be spending 3 times that, close to 5 trillion annually now.
Right, exactly.
Over the next decade. So, yes, there's a lot of money going into it. It has to get funneled in the right way. And I personally see this GGRF money as being very, very interesting in terms of creating the financial products, the support, bringing in the private capital to get, to develop new avenues to really explode in terms of, bringing in interesting ways to finance. A lot of this too potentially is fixed income type capital, and as you know, that needs to come in. And there's been a huge explosion in interest in private credit, as you know. And I think the fact that interest is already that there is going to be opportunity for that to bleed into like all this stuff that's going to get created. So I think that coming out of the GGRF, we're going to have a lot of new instruments.
Yeah, it's going to be really interesting because the way that you think about it is they're basically backstopping precedent.
That's right.
So, and it's a wonderful way in order to be able to kind of collectivize, as a society, what actually the good is and make sure that we more or less kind of help mitigate a piece of that risk in order to kind of help drive this forward at the pace that we need. Because to your point earlier, this is not, we don't have 50 more years. Like, we have to get this thing moving. So now let's take a look forward a little bit and think about, okay, well, what's actually not the next 5 years look like, not next 10, but really what is the next 6 months? And when you start thinking about the next 6 months, there's one big thing that kind of starts coming to mind, and that is that there's a whole bunch of elections, a whole bunch of consequential elections that's going to be coming around, and that we all know that basically people lead from the top. There's a lot of decisions, there's a lot of outcomes that are really predicated in terms of what actually happens in these kinds of elections. So with that being the case, what kind of guidance would you give our audience in terms of how you may actually want to kind of help better understand and prepare yourself for what these outcomes may be?
So to me, climate is not a political thing. In the same way, I love the UN Sustainable Development Goals. You kind of look at them, eliminate poverty, clean water. It's just, to me, it is, the care and stewardship of our planet. Like, these kinds of things just don't feel political to me. Having said that, look, there's, one of the concerns in the climate space is we have, these big acts that have come through. Now they've been approved by Congress and things like that. So they have to be unapproved, certain elements. And I think most importantly, a lot of the benefits of the Inflation Reduction Act and in, this carve out for the GGRF, it's benefiting red and blue states. And that is, I believe very strongly, I'm speaking personally, that is going to anchor a lot of, what may get undone at the end of the day. And so I remain, and this is the message I think I said when we met as a panel, I just remain incredibly hopeful that we are going to crack this nut at some point over the next X number of years. There's so much going on in new technologies and energy, and it's across the globe because the Inflation Reduction Act actually now spurred Europe to try to match up. I mean, the influx of interest, everyone is like, oh, go to the United States. So I do feel that there's such a momentum here. It's embedded in communities, red and blue. I'm very hopeful that a lot is going to, of the recent support initiatives are going to stick around. And hopefully we'll get through the next 6 months quickly and get on to business.
Yeah, a message of not just hope, but of optimism. It's always important. And I think for the conversation we're having today, it's actually incredible because it's about that idea of how do you translate the momentum and the optimism into real action. And as you've been talking about with the work that you do, with what Plan First Action about, it's really about bringing together these disparate stakeholders and actually having that conversation so that there is shared understanding and shared insights. So with that being sort of our mission and the work that you're already doing, we'd love to just ask you for each of those different types of stakeholders, what your sort of message would be for them. And I think it would be great to start with the founders and the startup community specifically, based on something you shared with us, with the audience at the March event during that panel discussion, which was your sort of origin story.
Yeah.
Part of what you shared was that it was just this moment of right time, right place, serendipity. So when you talk to these founders or aspiring founders who want to get involved, who want to be a part of the solution, but are trying to figure out what is the entry point, and maybe haven't had that moment of serendipity yet, what would your advice be for them?
So, look, and that is true, and I've had so many conversations with particularly young people who are doing something in more traditional finance and things like that, and they're like, oh, I really should be doing, I want to do something in the climate change way. And there is a time and place for everything. And there are times in your life that you can afford to take risks, and there are times in your life you can't. There are times in your life to do certain things now because it will give you the flexibility later to have even more impact. So I don't look at anybody and say you should or shouldn't or whatever. I think, but folks should know that every little bit counts. So, and every little good deed counts. If you are pleasant to the person next to you on the subway, they're just going to be a little more pleasant to the person that's next to them. And that kind of collective action and snowball effect, it matters. So high level, there are so many different ways if you want to get involved in climate solutions to get involved, from a very small volunteering act of some sort, all the way to, jump on some of the accelerate. There are wonderful incubators across the United States that are housing climate startups. Raised Green's original home was Greentown Labs outside of Boston, which houses 250 climate startups. They're hiring. Get involved. Raised Green has moved to Climate Haven, which is in New Haven now. That's our new home base, although I'm in New York City, as well as our head of community partnerships, Thomas Guest. But they're hiring. There are 25 plus startups there. Here at Newlab, I mean, there are tons and tons happening in the startup community. They're hiring. dig in, take a look. There's probably a spot for you.
There's opportunities out there if you just go and grab it. And to your point, it doesn't have to be the full swing over the fence right away. You can start. You can start every little bit.
And there's a volunteer organization. Food waste is a terrible thing. About 40% of our food here in the United States is waste. And when it goes into landfills, it becomes methane gas, which is like 30 times worse, more impactful. Now, it doesn't live that long in the atmosphere like carbon does, but if you're thinking about the short-term effects, this is just horrendous. And when you think about food insecurity, and according to the government website, about almost 1 million people in New York City have food insecurity. But there's a little organization, I did some volunteering work, called Rescuing Leftover Cuisine. And what they do is they come in with under 50 pounds of, the big organizations like City Harvest will go around to and pick up food at 100 pounds, 150 pounds, but there's a lot of food from smaller food establishments that's under 100 pounds, right? So Rescuing Leftover Cuisine comes in under that, and it's basically people on foot, and they have an app, and you can find in your 10-block radius, you sign up, you go pick up food at the local eatery or whatever. I mean, they tell you where to go. You pick it up. You walk it over to the food bank within 10 blocks. It's all like you can do it for an hour. You can do it at 9 o'clock at night. It's amazing. Jump on their website. Point being is if you're concerned about climate, there are so many ways to get involved. My personal story was I have 25 years of experience in the securities markets. I absolutely love and believe in the private securities markets. I believe, and the public markets, I just believe that private capital, that gets stuff happening. There's a place for government, but it's really the beauty of the capital markets that has made the United States an amazing place to grow businesses and innovate. So I was working in this field, and increasingly, my last role, had the opportunity to sit on some desks, oversaw from a compliance perspective the development of some ESG strategies. And what I realized, this was basically 2016 or so, that because of the data, because of the limitations of the public markets, and can you really get in there and have an impact and directly do something in the climate, in impact space in general. And I just was like, this isn't doing it for me. And at the same time, realizing we just don't have time to waste. And so I went on this journey to figure out, well, how do I take all this experience and get involved? And I was looking at much larger organizations, and then Climate Week New York, it's coming up in September, don't miss it. Was going to a lot of different events, listening in, and went to an event on blockchain and climate. And at lunch, there was an empty seat. I sat down and started to chat with a young fellow there. And the next thing I know, his name is Matt Maroney. He's a climate data scientist. We started chatting and introduced to his other fellow buddy, Franz Hochstrasser. He's a climate policy guy. And these two guys had just started the idea of Raise Green to be a securities platform to raise capital, but they didn't have securities background. So, and I had the passion for climate and the securities background, and I joined up and never looked back. But if I hadn't been open at that moment, sat down, there was an empty seat, and I just said, I'm going to sit there and start a conversation. So be open. You never know where it's going to happen.
As they say, the rest is history.
The rest is
it's
history.
A great story.
Never looked back. I believe in Raise Green. We're on this mission, and there's a place for flexible capital, impact investors, community ownership, and we are trying to fill that gap.
It's amazing. And it actually is, and we'll hit these quickly just because we know we appreciate you spending this time with us to share these insights. But the next audience you actually segued to in terms of your experience with private securities, and really what you said, how America in many ways is what it is because of the way the financial system has come to life. And so with that being said, what is your sort of, not maybe message, but advice, wisdom that you would share with those who were in the position where you were, that are starting to think about sustainability, but maybe don't have a sense of where they need to be looking for the data yet? What should they be paying attention to?
Well, look, there is so much happening out there. There are, so many organizations put out information on what's happening in the sustainability space and the impact space. I'm happy to give, and we can add it to the show notes, a couple of different periodicals that come to my inbox that I read every week and find valuable. As I said, Climate Week New York. If you're in New York, they just had San Francisco Climate Week. I mean, they're having them in different locations. This is the most amazing time. Make your schedule so that you have time to take advantage of what's happening. There are hundreds of events going on here in New York City, many of them open to anybody who'd like to join. Sometimes you have to sign up for them, so make sure you're looking for them. But literally doors are open. You can just jump in. But I would start with just starting to read and see what's happening, and going to talks and listening to podcasts and et cetera. And before you know it, you're going to be up a notch and have a better sense of what you might like to do.
Exactly. Listening to the Planet First Action podcast.
And then
Exactly.
first and foremost, Planet First Action podcast.
Nice setup.
And
So just to actually touch on two more things, just in terms of the overall audiences. So first of all, and we've been talking a lot about it in this particular show, about how important policy is, just generally speaking, and kind of what its role is. But those people who are actually the policy makers, like what kind of advice would you actually give them in terms of how you actually may want to structure some of these financial instruments? And again, it could be the IRA 2.0 or something in terms of that. But what kind of things should they actually look forward to as we kind of start moving these ball forward?
well, I think when they're making regulations, there is a place for regulation, and you have to be careful with it, because you overregulate, you stymie, and that is a very difficult balance, and that's a piece of the political divide as well. But regulators should be very thoughtful about what kind of regulations, and doing their research on where are the bottlenecks. There are hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of projects that are hung up in permitting, can't get done because they're stuck in permitting. That is a place for self-reflection and seeing how can we modify. I mean, regulations are there for a reason, right? They're to protect lands, they're to protect whatever, but if it's layer over layer, and then therefore you can't move forward, that is the advice for government, is to really, really be thoughtful with the idea that it isn't about stopping things from getting done, it should be about getting things done. And so, for every regulation you put in place, there should be a very, very thorough review and nonpartisan look at really what this is going to accomplish. And we need to compromise here in this country. Everybody can't have it, and for the greater good, we really do need to be thoughtful about compromising. But one would be to thoughtful regulation and be very careful about over-regulating. That's kind of commonplace. And then to the extent it would be to implement and then have the opportunity built into the process to actually modify as you go along, and have those work streams available to do it. So that's high level, and to definitely have business, have a lot of people at the table when you're making this decision.
Well, I think that's the most important thing, right? I mean, when I start thinking about policy, I think about the land of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
And so the role of partnerships and the role of getting everyone around the table to share kind of their perspective and story is so instrumental in terms of what effective policy should really look like. But the last one that we'll have here, is, I know, something very close to your heart, and we can actually hit it quite quickly before we close, is community leaders. So community leaders and being able to get on the ground is so important, but oftentimes they don't know when to start in terms of how to actually get involved in the energy transition. There's so many programs that are actually out there, but they don't necessarily have the historical precedence of understanding, okay, who they even need to speak to for what end, and then also the trust issue behind that. So that being said, what kind of advice would you give to those community leaders that are looking to get involved?
Besides just sending them to Raise Green. Send them to Raise Green first.
So look, there are, in the local communities, some more than others, there are organizations that are already focused on doing something in the climate space. And so, those organizations have a responsibility to educate community leaders and bring them along. And a piece of the monies that's being sent out to the through the GGRF is this capacity building. It's speaking to communities. It is working with community leaders. Because you're absolutely right. Communities are their own ecosystems, and community leaders, particularly in communities that have not trusted and have been disadvantaged and taken advantage of, you really have to start within the trusted community leaders. But there are, it is really going to be organizations on the ground that are already focused on this, that have some of the expertise or know how to get the expertise to work with the local community leaders, and it's all about education and getting the word out. So, it's really for those local organizations who know what they're trying to accomplish to make sure that they are working with those community leaders.
Yeah.
And then you can reach Raise Green, and we'd be happy to talk.
Well, Jackie, we cannot tell you how grateful we
Absolutely.
are to have had you spend this time with us and share these insights with our audience, especially each of those different types of stakeholders. That said, we cannot let you go until we give them a little bit more perspective on the person behind your title and your role. So we're going to ask you some fun questions now.
Okay.
Hopefully easier than some of the other ones. Maybe we'll make them harder. The first one is, especially now, looking back at how you've kind of structured your career, how you've grown, and what you are doing today. On the other side of things, from your how you spend your time, maybe in leisure or pastimes, if you could instantly master any skill or anything, what would that be?
Ooh. I would love to speak more languages, because I think that's the window to the world. Is it's such a shame. My father, came to this country. He spoke 6 languages when he arrived. He didn't speak English, but he did speak 6 languages. But it was in the time of it was all about assimilation, and so there was only English spoken in our home. And I'm like, darn. Why didn't I get that advantage? Because when you speak, multiple languages, you really have an entree. You're a global citizen in a way that you're not if you just speak English. So, to me, that would be amazing to be able to just speak, 5 languages and go from here to here. So that's my personal thing, just because it's really connects you with the world.
We'll get, I'll ask one a little bit more personal, but also more fun, I think. So the fact about you that actually people find most surprising.
Well, sometimes they're surprised because I'm born and bred in New York City, public school all the way, et cetera. And they're always surprised, you mean you grew up in New York City and you're nice? And I'm like, hey, they're just like, they think of New York as this, but New York is this city, is this massive place of small communities and people living, working, playing, bringing their families up. It's an amazing place to grow up. But I will say the other thing for fun is that I also, I grew up as a dancer.
Ah, see?
And when I was 16, I was accepted with the Radio City Music Hall Rockettes.
Oh, nice.
And
Fantastic.
I consider that kind of being, that's a fun fact
That is a fantastic
people
fact.
don't know.
Yeah, no, that is amazing.
So it goes to show you can do a lot of things in your life, and it is a journey.
Yeah.
It is a journey, and I really feel your 30s are better than your 20s, your 40s better than your 30s. I'm in my mid 60s now, and I just it just gets better, and there's so much to learn, and we're going to do this thing here on this earth.
Look a day over 29. And again, we cannot thank you enough for spending this time with us, for sharing these insights with this audience. So Jackie, as you know, one of the things that we want to do with Planet First Action is to bring together disparate stakeholders, facilitate dialogue. And part of that is even just between the guests that we bring on the show. So we have a question for you from our last guest, Tony Combs from Purpose Venture Group. So we're going to ask you that in a moment. But in the meantime, I'm going to also ask you to write down the question for next week's guest. And we are so excited next week to be bringing on Claire from Block Power, who Jackie mentioned is an absolutely fantastic company. It's going to be another great conversation. We're so looking forward to it. And we're going to be able to include your question for Claire at the end of that episode. So the question for you from Tony from last week is, what are you seeing in terms of the evolution of expectations of an investment criteria from investors on the Raise Green platform? And what does that mean for the founders who are looking to successfully fundraise on Raise Green?
That's great. As I said, over the last 6 to 9 months, we've spent some time speaking to our investors on the through the platform, and hoping that anybody listening today also, jumps on the platform and considers signing up for an account at Raise Green. It's free and et cetera. But what we know about folks that are interested in offerings on the Raise Green platform is that first and foremost, climate. So needs to touch climate in some manner. We also experience from our investors is that they love the story. So for issuers that are thinking about raising capital, particularly in a crowdfunding manner, is their ability to articulate the story and what ultimately that impact of whatever they're doing is going to have. The other piece of that is we're hearing from our investors is they love local. So again, the GGRF singing in the back of our head, but to the extent that it can be brought down to a local level where they kind of can see how this might impact others, but also to the extent that it's somehow, local to them. That could be, city, town, state, et cetera. So that in terms of folks that are thinking of raising capital on the platform, those are some of the things we're hearing. We're also hearing that, as I was telling you, people are very excited about leveraging other avenues of capital that they have, self-directed IRAs, DAFs, et cetera. So that is for folks that are looking to raise capital. They should be thinking about that in their dialogue as they, try to bring in a community to invest in them. One of the things you should realize about raising capital on Raise Green, it isn't set it and forget it. The expectation, if you're going to raise capital on a crowdfunding platform, is that you are going to bring your community as an issuer. So the best thing you can do is start to develop that community. It's really your email list, et cetera, getting out there, talking about your company, getting folks excited about it, and now they actually use the term community round instead of like an investment round. It's a community round. It's basically opening it up to your community, local, national, and et cetera, to come in and support what you're doing. So it is really about thinking through bringing in your community to invest in your project. So that is a piece of what we're doing with our issuers now, is we're reminding them of that super early on in the process. And it's not for everybody. Some folks don't want to do that. But the other thing, we're hearing is particularly, our investors, they're on a scale of impact to yield, to return, and some lean more, want more impact and care less about receiving a market return. Some are more interested in a market and then some return. And we find we do have a spectrum, but we're seeing a leaning towards a kind of fixed income interest, although there's interest in equity as well, because of the idea that they can recycle their impact funds. And I think we're hearing an interest. They want both, but definitely interested in a more fixed income component along with the equity, which when you think about crowdfunding historically, it's been more like an equity kind of thing. But from an impact perspective, we're hearing interest in both. So that's what, and maybe a little more debt, just because of the potential for recyclability. So those are some of the insights I'll share with you all.
That's amazing. Especially love the sort of the focus on the story, and it speaks to the difference in the different parts of the capital stack. They have different priorities, different things that matter. And so when it comes to Reg CF, that's good intel for especially the startup community to have. That if you're going to do that, think about your story and try to bring your community with you.
And it's not easy to articulate your story. There are folks, accelerators and things that can help you work on that.
You can also talk to Gordon and Frost.
And you can talk to Gordon and Frost, of course. Absolutely. Exactly. So anyhow, yeah, that's my answer to the question, Tony. Thanks for a good one.
For Ryan and I, for the whole GNF team, for the whole Planet First Action community, we really look forward to seeing what you continue to lead at Raise Green. Again, we'll put this in the show notes. If you want to learn more about Jackie, about the team over at Raise Green, go to raisegreen.com. If you want to learn more about the community, head over to planetfirstaction.com. And again, a huge thank you to Newlab for having us on this incredible stage and the meaning that we have from being up here. And we'll see you all next week.
All right.
Wonderful. Thank you very much.
Yeah, we had such a great time. Thank you so much.
Wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie.
We are so grateful to Jackie Logan for sharing her insights and expertise, for taking the time to really be with the Planet First Action community. Because again, this is more than just a series. This show is about a call to action for every community, every person, to not just know about the changes that are coming, but to really be informed and equipped to engage and support and shape those changes.
That's right, and as Jackie shared just now, there is no act that is too small on an individual level. Everyone has a role to play.
And we cannot overstate the importance and consequence of the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. Those $27 billion are going to fundamentally change our communities and our lives. That's why we brought on Tony Kearns from Purpose Venture Group in previous episodes with his work on the Power Forward Communities Coalition, which received 2 out of the $27 billion. It's why we brought on Jackie Logan last week and today from Raise Green, and why we are so excited to learn from Claire Doyle Dowd of Block Power, one of the leading organizations working in communities to renovate homes and create healthier and cleaner communities next week.
3 guests, back to back, each with a different perspective and experiences, but all of that with a focus on just how massive the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund really is and what we should do in order to prepare for it today.
And this call to action, this convening of communities, we urge you to take that for what it really is, not just to listen, but to spread the word. Share Tony Kearns' interviews. Share this episode in part 1 with Jackie Logan from last week. Share next week's episode with Claire Doyle Dowd. Share them with your friends, your families, because information is power. And it is so crucial that this once-in-a-generation moment, that communities have the opportunity to truly effectively engage and be a part of the solutions that are deployed.
Absolutely. So right now, go to planetfirstaction.com to learn more about the Greenhouse Gas Reduction Fund. We have an entire slew of resources available to learn about it, what it means for you, wherever you are on your sustainability journey.
And if you want to learn more about Jackie Logan and the team at Raise Green's incredible work that they are doing on the front lines of communities, head over to raisegreen.com, because you heard Jackie herself. They are there. They are a resource, whether you want to be an investor, an issuer, or if you are just a member of a community that wants to learn more about how your community is going to be changed by this massive transformation. They are there. They have the resources. They're there to help, to educate. Just reach out to them, definitely.
Absolutely. So thank you so much for listening in. Thank you so much for being a part of this community. We really look forward to seeing you all next week with our interview with Claire Doyle-Dowd from BlockPower.
And as we close out today's episode, we want to leave you with something to consider when it comes to really this moment of massive transformation of our communities and the role that each of us has in shaping a better future, the role that we have with this call to action to convene as a community to learn and to engage. And those really are the words of the late Senator John McCain, who, as we mentioned, regardless of your politics, regardless of what you believe when it comes to the role of government, he was an American hero. He was a former presidential candidate and truly was a public servant, because he had it exactly right when he said that our identities and our sense of worth are not circumscribed but enlarged by serving good causes bigger than ourselves. And this moment right now affords each of us that opportunity. And with that, we'll see you all next week.